Mr Speaker, I present a legislative statement on the Employment Relations Pay Deductions for Partial Strikes Amendment Bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Employment Relations Pay Deductions for Partial Strikes Amendment Bill be now read a first time. I nominate the Education and Workforce Committee to consider the bill. At the appropriate time, I intend to move that the bill be reported to the House by the 22nd of April 2025. Mr Speaker, the Employment Relations Pay Deductions for Partial Strikes Amendment Bill reintroduces the ability of employers to make pay deductions in response to partial strikes. This change to collective bargaining settings will provide a far more effective and efficient bargaining environment where rights and consequences are more balanced and which minimises potential disruption to public services. We have seen partial strikes result in patients facing delays to receiving medical scans and treatment due to medical staff limiting the number of scans they completed each day, and kids missing out on education due to teachers refusing to teach certain year groups on certain days. However, in spite of these inconveniences created by the withdrawal of people's work, there were no pay packet consequences for the medical staff or teachers involved in these partial strikes. Earlier this year, train operators in Wellington undertook a work-to-rule industrial action, including refusing shift changes, which led to disruption for travellers. And currently, the New Zealand Defence Force Public Service Association union members are working to rule. They've been taking coordinated breaks and stopped working at heights or off-site. The Minister of Defence has responded by authorising uniformed personnel to cover civilian work in selected areas. Needless to say, this is a rare move from the Minister of Defence, and it is a shame that it's been made necessary by this industrial action. On the other hand, when a full strike occurs, employers can respond by suspending the employees and not providing pay. In this situation, there are negative consequences for both sides. The employees lose pay, the employer loses output. This provides an incentive for both sides to cease industrial action and return to the bargaining table as soon as possible. The same cannot be said for partial strike action under the current rules. If an employee is engaged in a partial strike, the employer's options are to either accept the partial strike action or to lock out or suspend the employees for the duration of the strike. Employers who do not want to be so heavy-handed in their response have no choice but to continue to pay the partially striking workers in full. There is currently no provision to allow a more nuanced or proportionate response, as would be normal in a society where people believe in cause and effect thinking. The ability to make pay deductions in response to partial strikes was introduced in 2014 as part of a package of amendments aimed at ensuring a flexible and fair employment relations framework for both employees and employers. In 2018, the previous government removed employers' ability to reduce pay in response to partial strikes. Now, once this bill becomes law, an employer will not have to make a pay deduction in response to partial strikes. Under this bill, it will be an option for an employer involved in a negotiation. Employers will again be able to respond to partial strikes by being able to either reduce an employee's pay by a proportionate amount or deduct 10% of their pay. The ability to make a fixed deduction of 10% gives employers a choice in situations where it may be difficult to calculate a proportionate pay deduction. For example, for a large workforce, without the option to make it a fixed deduction, the administrative costs of calculating the proportion of work impacted could mean that it is not practical for some employers to make a deduction. Restoring employers' ability to make pay deductions for partial strikes could help incentivise both parties to return to the bargaining table and reach agreement sooner. This will reduce the impacts on communities that result from ongoing industrial action. I consider that enabling employers to make partial pay deductions provides the opportunity for a more balanced and appropriate response to partial strikes. It's also more consistent with the approach used in Australia and the United Kingdom. While I recognise the entitlement of employees to strike in support of their collective bargaining claims, they should not be able to do it at no cost to themselves, effectively putting the cost onto the employer. And as we heard in the case of school children and their parents and those patients waiting for vital medical scans, actually putting the cost onto the customers or the patients or the students of their employer. In conclusion, this bill will provide employers with a specific response to partial strikes by reintroducing the ability to make pay deductions in response to partial strikes. It is sensible, proportionate change that should minimise potential disruption to public services. All New Zealanders will be able to have their say on the bill when it goes to Select Committee. Mr Speaker, I just hasten to add that I have brought this bill and taken the speech on behalf of the Minister for Workplace Relations, the Honourable Brooke van Velden. And I have to say that while she could not be in the House today, she is doing a superb job across the portfolio of making our labour laws make sense for contractors, with holidays pay, with personal grievances. And I hear Camilla Bellich, the one-time employment lawyer, braying away there, saying she's constantly attacking workers. Actually, she's not. And it says something about Camilla Bellich's attitude towards the workers, that she believes something like this bill, the idea that if you work, you get paid. If you don't work, you don't get paid. If you work less, you get paid less. If you work more, you get paid more. To most New Zealanders, this kind of logic is common sense and first nature. To the Labour Party, they believe that you should be able to go on strike, inconvenience patients, inconvenience students, inconvenience parents, and still get paid the full amount, all the while creating incentives to continue industrial action. Well, Mr Speaker, once upon a time there was a Labour Party that actually believed in public services for the public. Their interest was an equal opportunity for every child to get an education, for every patient, whether or not they had the means to get health care. And what do you have today? You have a Labour Party that's going to stand up and complain and say it's an attack on workers, to say that if you don't work, you don't get paid, and if you do work, you do get paid, and if you go on strike, you are withholding your work and not working, so you don't get paid. And then they'll
Ms Bellich, I note that you're the next speaker. That might be a good, better opportunity than yelling across the House.
Well, Mr Speaker, I've seen Ms Bellich give many speeches, and I'd never contest your ruling, but I'm not entirely sure about that one. Mr Speaker, the thing about it is...
yeah, Mr Seymour, sit down.
Speaker?
Camilla Bellich. Point of order. You've challenged, criticised the Speaker's ruling, so I've curtailed your speech. So if your point of order is in relation to that, don't bother.
Well, actually, Mr Speaker, it is, because it was clearly in jest. I was facing significant barracking.
To which, Mr Seymour, I had intervened, and you didn't need to do that. Sit down, Camilla Bellich.
Well, actually, Mr Speaker, I've got a right...
So sit down, Mr Seymour. Oh. Camilla Bellich.